holes, their mouths popped wide holding the light fixtures. When we got into the brass bed, we got the show on the road. I was almost sure some steamed-up joke in the adjoining room had his gizmo focused on the carnival through a drilled hole peeking from a cherub's empty eye socket. Pepper let me out of her hog at 1:30 in the a.m., just 2 blocks from Weeping's horse stand. I felt good. I was going to collect 5 fat ones for my pleasant night's work. It was like having a license to steal. I spotted Weeping's pinhead in his Buick. As I walked toward him, I couldn't stop thinking about the Eastern blackmailer. I thought about that green rain that would fall when Pepper started rolling those phony hits in. I thought about how I could catch a few palms full. Smooth as silk, the payoff came off. When Weeping handed me my scratch, he gave me a funny look. He said, "Take it easy, blood. Take it easy." The next day I went downtown and got clean. It was the early years for the Nat King Cole trio. They were playing for a $2 dance that night at Liberty Hall. Party and I were in the balcony at a table overlooking the crowded dance floor. We were slaving like sandhogs trying to tunnel into the flashy high yellows on our laps. They were almost stoned, ready for the killing floor. Party saw him first coming in the front door of the auditorium. He knifed me in the side with his elbow. Then Khan style from the side of his mouth he whispered, "Delansky, the heat." The bastard's head was on a swivel. He was looking everywhere at once. I felt mad butterflies with stingers ricocheting in my belly when his eyes spotted me and locked on me. I froze. His eyes were still riveted to me as he walked up the stairway straight for me. I pretended to ignore him. He walked up behind me and stood there for a long moment. Then he dropped a hand like an anvil on my shoulder. He said, "Get up. I want to talk to you." My legs were shuddery as I stood in a small alcove with him. He said, "Where were you around 10 and after last night?" Relief and courage flooded me. That was easy. I hedged. "Why?" He said, "Look, punk, don't get cute. Where were you?" "Don't answer." "I know where you were. You were out on Crystal Road in the nighttime burglarizing the home of Mr. and Mrs. Frank Ibbets. Nighttime burglary is 5 to 10. My courage and relief swiftly drained out. Frank Ibbets was Pepper's own man. He was roughly frisking me now. He ran his hands into my side pockets. With one hand, he brought out the $300 left from my payoffs, plus 20 clean dollars. The other came out with a strange brass door key. He said, "Geez, for a flunky in a drugstore, you got a hell of a bankroll. Where did you get it? And where and what does this key fit?" I said, "Officer, that's crap game money. I have never seen that key before." He grabbed me firmly like he had captured Sutton and walked me through the dancers out the door to his short. He took me down and booked me on suspicion of grand theft burglary. He also booked the scratch and key as evidence. Mama came down bright and early the next morning. She was in a near-fainting dither. She was clutching her chest over her heart. She said, "Bobby, you are going to kill your mama. You haven't been out 6 months, and now you're back in trouble? What's wrong with you? Are you crazy? You need prayer. Get down on your knees and pray to the good Lord." I said, "I don't need to pray. Mama, believe me, there is nothing to worry about. I didn't steal anything from Pepper's house. I am not nuts. Pepper will tell the truth. Mama, I was with her." I got my first nightmare inkling of the corkscrew crisscross when Mama broke into tears. She rolled her eyes to heaven. She blubbered, "Bobby, there's no hope for you. You are going to spend your young life in prisons. Don't you know, son, your mama loves you? You don't have to lie to me." "I went out to see her early this morning," she said. She told me she hasn't seen you in a week. Mr. Delansky has brought Pepper's spare key down here. That key in your pocket was one you stole when you made a delivery out there." Finally, she went down the corridor. Her shoulders were jerking in her sobbing. It was an iron cross. My public defender went to that hotel to get corroboration for my alibi. The joint had been too crowded, too hectic. None of the employees remembered Pepper and me. At least, they say they didn't. The desk man on that night had been a substitute and wasn't now available. My signature wasn't on the register anyway. I went into court again with the dirty end of the stick. I was a parolee arrested at 1 a.m., with a bottle of whiskey in front of me in a public place. Pepper looked like a prospect for a convent. She had stripped herself of paint and gewgaws. She testified that the key found in my slide was hers, and that, yes, it was possible that I had stolen it while making deliveries to her home. No, she had not seen me for a week before my arrest. My defender had gotten a change of venue. I was afraid to go before the judge who had sent me to the reformatory. I got 2 years in state prison for grand theft, the amount of $500. My parole was to run concurrently with the new sentence. Pepper's old man was with her in court. They brought the cross. I couldn't figure out who sold it to them. Was Delansky the joker that Weeping worked for? Or had Delansky heard that I had a wad and, without knowing anything about the hotel affair, sold it to Pepper? For what reason had the old man bought it? Had those hotel employees been bribed or threatened? If Delansky was the brain, did he want me out of the way for a reason other than Pepper? Maybe someday I'll find out what really happened. I know if I had lots of scratch, Miss Justice would have smiled on me. She favors the bird with the scratch. The Waupun State Prison was tough, but in a different way than the reformatory. Here the cons were older, many of them murderers, serving life sentences. These cons would never put up with the kind of petty tyranny that was practiced in the reformatory. Here the food was much better. There were industries here. A con could learn a trade if he wanted to. He could go into the yard during recreation hours and learn other trades and skills. Here the desperate heistmen congregated to plot new, more sensational robberies. The fruits and punks lay on the grass in the sun romancing each other. This was a prison of cliques, of bloody vendettas. I found my level with the soft-smoking, smooth Midwestern pimps and stuff players. Since I was one of the youngest cons in the joint, I bunked in a dormitory. It was like a suite in the Waldorf compared to the bug-infested tight cells in the reformatory with their odious crap buckets. It was there, in the dormitory, that I got the insatiable desire to pimp. I was a member of a clique that talked about nothing except whores and pimping. I began to feel a new slickness and hardness. I worked in the laundry. I kept my clothing fresh and neat. It was in the laundry that I met the first man from whom I got cunning to balance my hardness. He was an old drag man with his bit getting short. He was the first to attempt to teach me to control my emotions. He would say, "Always remember, whether you be sucker or hustler in the world out there, you've got that vital edge if you can ironclad your feelings. I picture the human mind as a movie screen. If you're a dopey sucker, you'll just sit and watch all kinds of mind-wrecking, damn fool movies on that screen." He said, "Son, there is no reason except a stupid one for anybody to project on that screen anything that will worry him or dull that vital edge. After all, we are the absolute bosses of that whole theater and show in our minds. We even write the script. So always write positive, dynamic scripts and show only the best movies for you on the screen, whether you are pimp or priest." His rundown of his screen theory saved my sanity many years later. He was a twisted, wise man, and one day, When he wasn't looking, a movie flashed on the screen. The title was Death for an Old Con. He died in his sleep behind the high gray walls. His fate was that which lives like a specter with all cons, the fear of dying in a cell. I sure missed that convict philosopher. The wisdom he taught me took me successfully through my bit. I was released after 21 months. I got 3 months good time for good conduct. With good time, I was free, slick, and bitter. No more small towns for me. I was going to the city to get my degree in pimping. The pepper cross had answered a perplexing question for me. Why did justice really always wear a blindfold? I knew now. It was because the cunning bitch had dollar signs for eyeballs. Chapter 4. A Degree in Pimping. When I got back to Milwaukee, Mama, and the street, my mind was straitjacketed into the pimp game. Back in the joint, I had dreamed almost nightly. They were cruel playets. They were fantastic. I would see myself gigantic and powerful like God Almighty. My clothes would glow. My underwear would be rainbow-hued silk petting my skin. My suits were spun gold shot through with precious stones. My shoes would be dazzling silver. The toes were as sharp as daggers. Beautiful whores with piteous eyes groveled at my feet. Through the dream mist, I would see huge-shaped stakes. The whores' painted faces would be wild in fear. They would wail and beg me not to murder them on those sharp steel stakes. I would laugh madly. Springs of scarlet would spurt from their behinds as I joyfully booted them, crotch first, onto the sharp pikes. They would flop around like dying chickens. They would finally fall away in a welter of blood into 2 red halves. When I awoke, my ticker would be earthquaking inside me. The hot volley of the savage thrill lay sticky set between my trembling thighs. I had other terrible dreams. I would be very tiny. A gargantuan Christ in a sea of light would be towering above me. In his anger, his eyes would be blazing blue suns. His silky platinum hair would stand on end in his rage. A shaft of purest white light would shoot from the tip of his index finger. He would point toward a woman. Her back would be turned to me. He would hand me a barbed leather whip. Like a crash of summer thunder, he would command, "Punish this evil woman. Destroy the devil inside her. The Lord so directs thee." Eagerly, I would grab the heavy whip in both hands. I would bring it down with all my force on the woman's back. She would just stand there. The scarlet would drain down from